Picture yourself at the edge of a high diving board. No matter how many times you've jumped off, you still feel those little butterflies before you take the leap. Why is it that no matter how many times we've done something before, we often feel that twinge of fear before jumping in? It's because fear is wired into who we are, but that doesn't mean it has to stop us from achieving our goals, because we choose a different path. And that is why the afraid don't get paid. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Afraid Don't Get Paid. I'm super excited. We have an amazing guest here, Dr. Russel Kennedy, who is an author of one of my favorite books, Anxiety RX. He is such an accomplished medical doctor as well as a neuroscientist. Dr. Kennedy, thank you so much for being on today's episode. How are you?
I am good, Candace. How are you doing?
I'm good. I have been thinking all about anxiety
and
how it affects.
They're not that good. Yeah.
So tell everyone who hasn't read your book a little bit more about your background and what led you to start studying anxiety.
Sure. Well, the short version is I study anxiety because I was an anxious mess myself for decades. So I grew up with a father with schizophrenia and bipolar. So I grew up with a lot of chaos in my household. So that became kind of normal for me to be hypervigilant, to overthink, to try and read my father's moods all the time. So I became this sort of hypervigilant overthinker. And I think that just set the stage for, this kind of anxiety in me, which I believe is more actually to do with a stored energy in my body from living with chaos for that long than it really has to do with my mind. Like, I really believe that anxiety is just mostly reflected by the mind, but it's a reflection of this old trauma that gets stored in us, typically in childhood. And then it just keeps whirring around and then we worry based on that, because it does feel like we're doing something when we're overthinking or hypervigilant. It feels like we're protecting ourselves from this old alarm, but we're trying to protect ourselves from the wrong thing. We're trying to protect ourselves from the child in us who is hurt and scared and lonely. And that's what we should be connecting with, because fixing your thoughts, it's like the old saying about give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, and teach a man to fish and he'll, eat forever.
Right.
I mean, you probably get pretty tired of fish after a while, but still, it is one of those things that I think is really important to understand what's the true root cause of where your anxiety is coming from, which is mostly a lot of us from our childhood.
Wow, that's so amazing. I mean, I can't recall how I even came across your book, but I was like, wow, I know I have anxiety. That's me. I need that. And as I read your book, I connected so much to your story and your childhood, as I also have a mentally ill father still, and just so much chaos, as you grow up, not knowing when it's going to be okay or when it's not, and when he's going to go into another episode. And so I know I have anxiety, but a lot of people don't necessarily know what anxiety is. What is your definition of anxiety?
Yeah, mine's a bit weird. My definition of anxiety is just anxious thoughts. That's all anxiety is. And anxiety itself isn't painful. It's only painful when you believe those thoughts. So the little story that I often tell is, if I have two 15-year-olds in my office, a boy and a girl, and I say to the girl, you might be pregnant, her whole system will go into alarm. Whereas if I say that to the boy, you might be pregnant, nothing's going to happen because he doesn't believe the thoughts. So for me, anxiety is really just the anxious thoughts. And the painful part of what we attribute to anxiety is this sense of alarm that it triggers in our bodies. And that alarm, typically has been there since we were children, and it gets flared up, and then we try and think our way out of a feeling problem. And the overthinking distracts us from the pain in our body, but it doesn't do anything about the underlying cause. So it basically, we get conditioned to worry, because when we go up into our heads, we escape this alarm that's really stored in our body. And we'll probably get into this, but I didn't find this out until I actually, kind of hit the wall in 2013, where I left medicine and I really lost a lot of my identity. And then a friend of mine took me on a little LSD trip at that time, because I was really in bad shape. And I really saw that my anxiety, what I called my anxiety, was actually this sense of alarm, this energy that was stuck kind of in my solar plexus. And then once I started dealing with that alarm, which I believe, if we're really going to get into this quickly, is my younger self. I believe that the alarm that we store in our body is our younger self. And if we can connect with that younger version of ourselves, we can heal a lot of that old pain and solve the problem at its source, as opposed to chasing our thoughts, because our thoughts aren't actually the problem. And that's how I define anxiety. Anxiety is just anxious thoughts. It's only when you believe them that your body reacts. And when your body reacts, that's what causes the pain.
Yes, absolutely. I love your approach to this definition. It really feels more whole than what I've at least been taught to believe. I go to therapy now, and I've read a lot of self-help books, and a lot of the books talk a lot about being more positive or just thinking less and focused on, strategies and tips to calm the brain down. But what you're really saying and calling forth is this deeper connection between your mind and your body, but really focusing on the body, right?
Yeah, because that's where I believe the root cause of the anxiety is in the first place, right? So we can fix the thoughts, but it's like thinking positive and that'll help you in the short term.
Right.
But it really won't solve the root of the problem. The root of the problem is this trauma that we hold in our systems, typically from childhood. And we hold that in our body. For me, it's in my solar plexus. For a lot of the patients I deal with, it's in their chest or their throat or their belly. And then we find that alarm. And this is kind of what I think happens. This is the short version of what I believe happens in anxiety. So when we're children, we experience a trauma that's too much for us to bear as children. So what we do is we suppress or repress that trauma into our unconscious mind. This is what Freud would call it as well. So Freud wasn't actually that wrong. He got a little hooked up in the sex thing, but other than that, he had a lot of great concepts.
Yeah.
So we bury this stuff in our unconscious mind, and the body is a representation of the unconscious mind. And if you've read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, you'll know that the unconscious mind reflects itself in the body. And one of the analogies that I draw is, if you have trauma from your childhood that you haven't processed or you haven't dealt with, it's like holding an inflated beach ball 2 feet underwater. You can do it, but it takes a tremendous amount of energy, and it drains us. It tires us out, and we get used to distracting into our heads and overthinking and becoming hypervigilant, because that distracts us away from this pain in our body. So the reason why most people don't heal from anxiety with traditional therapy is because they're trying to treat the thoughts, when the thoughts are really just the byproduct of this old alarm. The little analogy that I draw, it's like if you're in a rowboat and you have a hole in the boat and it's filling up with water, you can bail water out of your boat, which is kind of like doing talk therapy and cognitive therapy and stuff. And I have nothing against those therapies, because I think they help. But unless you go under, unless you fix that hole in the boat, which is essentially that old alarm, that old pain that you're storing in your body, unless you bring that up and start processing it, you're always going to be bailing water.
Wow. So, I often hear a lot of people, so it sounds like one of the first things we have to do is, like you said, be open to even going back to that time in our childhood and actually recalling those painful experiences, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the role of a good therapist comes in, and I'm a real big fan of somatic therapy. My wife's a somatic trauma therapist, so she deals with people who've had trauma before the age of 7 years old. So I watch a lot of her programs. I'm in the somatic experiencing training program myself. I really believe that that's a really wonderful tool in helping people recover from anxiety. That and like internal family systems. And there's a bunch of things that I use with people that really help bring that old alarm up to the surface, because people don't want to go back there. So you don't want to go back into your trauma. So you stay stuck in your head. And that's why people say, I can't get out of my head. I'm overthinking all the time. And we get stuck in our head because we don't want to go down into our body, because that's where all the pain is.
Wow. Truly, that's how you put it. Yeah, I feel that. Again, I found your book at such a timely point in my, not only my life, but in my career. As you know, I help a lot of entrepreneurs, specifically coaches online, monetize their business. And I had already been processing my trauma. I knew that there was stuff there. I'm always someone looking to grow, but there's just something about starting a business that can really bring that trauma out or heighten it if it was already there, that I think a lot of people don't talk about, right? Because it forces you to create a new identity and really build something from the ground up. And for a lot of us, that can breed, uncertainty and this complex relationship with like pushing yourself and putting yourself out there, but not knowing some of the results, right? And as humans, we already don't necessarily do well with uncertainty. So how might you help us and the folks listening get a better understanding of managing our anxiety and navigating the uncertainty of entrepreneurship?
Well, I think the first thing is to gain an awareness around uncertainty. What was uncertainty like for you as a child? Candace, like what was uncertainty like for you?
Yeah. Oof. I mean, that's a great question. I think a lot of it stems from my father.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Yeah,
Shocker. No. And his
yeah,
manic depressive episodes, as well
yeah.
as poverty and financial stability. There was a lot of instability with that, and moving houses and, paycheck to paycheck. And it's like, wow, are we going to have a good month or a bad month? Am I going
Right.
to be able to play my sports and be in all of the things, or can we not afford it this month? And there wasn't much certainty. One thing I will say is I was very loved. I come from a very loving household. So I'm very blessed to have that, but there was a lot of
Yeah.
uncertainty around our stability, our financial stability, the more emotional stability of a strong parent figure. And so I definitely think that plays a part into not only then creating my own success and creating my own money and like, can I do it? Sometimes I think we couldn't do it when I was young. Will I be able to do it now? Right.
Yeah. And I think it's, so what I would do with you, if I was working with you, I'd go, okay, can I take you back? Like, first of all, I would I would ground you in yourself first. So do you have shoes on right now?
I do.
Okay. Can you slip them off?
All right.
And then put your feet flat on the floor and then really just put a little bit of pressure on your feet.
Yeah.
Just so that you feel the grounding of the floor, of the earth beneath you.
I love
And
it.
then just relax your jaw, relax your shoulders, maybe let a breath flow out of your system. And then breathe in.
Yeah.
And then I'll take you back to a point where you weren't sure maybe as a child where the next meal was coming from or where you were going to live or whatever. And then I would get you to focus somewhere between your chin and your pubic bone. Like, where do you feel that in your body? Where do you feel that uncertainty in your body?
This is interesting because sometimes I feel it in my stomach, but other times it's like in my chest. I
Okay.
think it fluctuates depending on the severity of it. But when it's really severe and I'm in a like anxiety like trap,
Yeah.
I can hear it in my chest and then beating into my ear, almost my heartbeat.
Okay. Can you feel it now? Like when you bring that memory to mind, do you feel it in your chest now?
A little bit, but I definitely think I would have it more had I not been practicing the things in your
Oh, for
book.
sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So what I would do, this is just a short version of it, of course, is I just get you to put your hand over that area in your chest and just really sort of make an intention using your subconscious and your conscious mind, make an intention to connect with that area. Because I do believe that alarm that we hold is our younger self. And believe me, trained as a medical doctor and a neuroscientist, I want to have a seizure sometimes when I talk about this stuff because it sounds so woo, right? Like it sounds so ethereal. But really, after 30 years of anxiety, it was the only thing that really helped me heal and helped me start my own business. Like I've started my own business, in the last month or so.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been building up to it for a while now. But basically what I tell people is go back into your old trauma, find it in your body, and then really try to connect with it. Put your hand over it, breathe into it. There's a lot of things that we can do to make that younger self feel less alone. Because a lot of us, and especially entrepreneurs, I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are driven. Like they're really driven. And a lot of them are driven because of a sense of lack in their childhoods.
Absolutely.
So
That's me.
we're coming from a lack mentality in a way. And, the thing about lack mentality is it can drive you to succeed. Absolutely. But can you enjoy that success once you got there? That's the thing. So if you're being driven by an old maladaptive program, you'll get to your goals. You'll get to your $50,000 months or whatever, but you still won't be happy.
Yeah. What you're speaking of is exactly what I call like my rock bottom last year when, I've been in business for 4 years, and that has been my motivator. I won't be poor again. I'm going to make money. I'm making a better life for myself, and being naturally, confident, that has gotten me very far.
Sure.
But it could no longer serve me in this next season of my life because as you mentioned, it was coming from a place of scarcity. And so once I started seeing the success of my business, I couldn't hold on to it in the way in which I was building it. And that anxiety got the best of me. The depression came in, right? The triggers, the childhood trauma started really,
Self-sabotage, yeah.
the self-sabotage. And it's like, wow, I can't even look my own success in the mirror and believe this is me
Right.
because of that trauma.
Well, it isn't your, maybe it isn't your authentic self. Maybe it's your adaptive self, because, that's what made me a doctor. That's what made me a stand-up comic. That it does drive you, that adaptation that we create when we're children to adapt to a complex or uncertain environment does serve us in a way.
Yeah.
But the problem is we become this sort of almost Pavlovian conditioned to ride that accommodation, that adaptation, until the wheels fall off. So if one of your adaptations is to overthink and worry and focus, you may convince yourself that overthinking and worrying allows you to focus better and allows you to sort of accomplish things, which is really your mind kind of lying to you. Because what I found in my life is the best thing that has helped me is something like meditation, something that slows the thoughts down, so you have a chance to really see them for what they are. And the other thing about this whole thing is learning how to be aware of uncertainty. Okay, this is uncertain. And can you embrace the uncertainty? I think that's it. Like when you embrace uncertainty, you start changing your brain chemistry. When you move towards something, you start changing your brain chemistry towards like dopamine and endogenous opiates, which is kind of like the brain's internal morphine. Like when you start facing your fears and you go straight at it, you will create this neurochemistry of dopamine and endogenous opiates to help you move forward. Now, the opposite's also true. If you move away from something, your brain says, okay, I'm moving away from this. This must be dangerous. So what happens is we start secreting norepinephrine, epinephrine, and cortisol, which are basically survival hormones. And our brain gets the idea that we're in survival. So if we can move towards something, and Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about this too, the neuroscientist, about when you move towards something, you create a different neurochemistry than when you move away from something. So it's really about embracing that uncertainty. Can I grab that uncertainty, and rather than sort of hide from it and hope that it doesn't come true, can I embrace the uncertainty and move towards it and actually relish the uncertainty? Because that will change our neurochemistry, and you'll be able to move forward past those blocks. Because when you go into withdrawal and survival, all your old traumas will come up and they will sabotage you. There's a great book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, which is one of those things when you start succeeding, there is this kind of sense that your ego doesn't like it. Your ego does not like change, especially if you had a traumatic childhood. Your ego doesn't like change, even positive change. So it is one of those things that, can you learn how to be aware of uncertainty, and can you move towards it and embrace it? Because that will change the chemistry of your brain to allow you to adapt to it. Whereas if you move away from it, which we reflexively do, I mean, all organisms withdraw from pain. But the problem is then we move into a survival protective mindset, and we can't really move forward if we're in survival and protection.
Wow, that's so amazing. I'm so glad you educated us on all of that. It makes so much sense because when I have, gotten in the practice of moving forward, it starts to feel a little easier, even though there is uncertainty. And when I really break that pattern and get really deep into my anxiety, it can almost feel like the progress I was making, it takes me 7 steps back, and I get so caught in that sort of, like you said, survival mode and that mentality where it can lead to that self-sabotage of my success and my results. So I'm really glad you shared that with us. I've been saying that to my clients for so long. Like, there's something beautiful that you feel in your body as you start to condition yourself to just take steps and move forward time and time again. And you just put the scientific explanation on it for us.
As
So I
to
love
why it
it.
works, yeah. Well, that's the basis of EMDR as well. And Huberman talks about this as well. It's like when you're walking forward, your eyes are tracking laterally, side to side, side to side, side to side. And when your eyes move side to side like that, the amygdala, the so-called fear center of the brain, I don't really like that term because it's not really that accurate, but it works for this particular explanation. But the amygdala, the energy in the amygdala calms considerably. And the amygdala plays a big role in our old traumas, in remembering our old traumas, because it has no sense of time. So when you go back into your old trauma and say, someone, for me, if someone mentions suicide or schizophrenia or bipolar, that triggers me. And part of me actually goes back to that place of pain with my father. Because there is this theory that if you experience a significant trauma as a child, part of you stays there. And that is borne out by neuroscience. It's borne out by the amygdala, because the amygdala has no sense of time. So when something comes up in your present day environment that reminds you, say for you, it might be scarcity or lack or not having enough money or not having enough to eat. There's part of you that gets tracked back into that child that was exactly in that place where they were helpless and powerless. So if we can find that child, which is what we were saying earlier in the little talk we're having today, if we can find that child through the sensation of alarm in our body and reassure that child that way, we can actually stop that self-sabotage and allow that child to emerge and be the authentic person that we wanted to be, and then come from this place of authenticity where we don't feel like we have to sabotage ourselves, because we feel like we're coming from our real, genuine, authentic self, and not from a self that had to adapt, had to cope, that had to learn how to sort of, cut in line and get forward and work hard and that kind of, and there's nothing wrong with working hard. It's just, what's your motivation? Where is that working hard coming from? Is it coming from your authentic self, or is it coming from the adaptive self who didn't have these things as a child, who is, really trying to reproduce a security that it never had when it was growing up?
Wow, that is so powerful. Especially the part where you talk about like the amygdala and the relationship between trauma and like your body, your mind doesn't know the timing, right? It's funny you say that, because over the weekend I was with a family member and we were in the grocery store and they rung up one of the groceries and basically tried to make one cheaper by ringing up something that was less expensive so they could save money. And obviously it's wrong. I don't do this, but my father used to do this.
Okay.
He was in one of his episodes and we couldn't afford things at the grocery store. And in that instant when this person did that, it took me straight back to the trauma. I could visualize myself in the grocery store with my dad when I was 7 years old, and I just shut down. I got so angry and I got so worried, and I almost allowed myself to stay that way for the rest of the day until I was able to be aware and bring consciousness and relax my body and breathe when I got in the car and realize I'm safe. And that experience is not, what happened when I was younger, and I'm in control to some extent, right? And it's just amazing what certain triggers can do. And I've learned, especially as an entrepreneur, to become more in tune with what can trigger me, because a lot can happen outside of us that can trigger us. And if we don't even know those triggers, I find that can make business really difficult,
Yeah. And when we are triggered, that's when I say go into your body. Like when you into that same, if you get into that same situation again, where do I feel that? Do I feel that in my chest or my stomach, what you said earlier on? Where does that come up for me? And then you put your hand over that area. And along with saying those things, those reassuring things, but really we're feeling emotional beings and we feel life through our bodies. So if you can connect to that sensation in your body, you're probably connected to that child in you that felt exactly that way when your dad was doing that. So if you can reassure that child in you at the source using that feeling in your body, putting your hand over it, breathing into it, even talking to it after people, when I work with people for a while, they develop this sort of dialogue with their younger self. I mean, the inner child is also a word that used, but often the inner child has so much sort of negative kind of woo-woo,
Right.
connotations to it. I usually prefer younger self, because can you find that younger self that is upset, that was upset, that this is triggering? And can you reassure, through touch, through breath, through, just relaxing your muscles, just saying, I've got you, I'm here for you, I'm connected to you. That will actually help you a lot more than just trying to reassure yourself through thoughts and say, oh, I'm not there anymore, which is all fine, but actually if you add that feeling piece to it, you're really getting at the root cause of the underlying issue rather than just trying to, massage it a little bit with changing your thinking.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Something else you said that I want to touch on a little bit more. I work with really brilliant minds and very highly creative people, and they're high achievers, and most of them suffer from some level of perfectionism. But a
Yeah.
lot of my clients, they will describe this, or they believe that this overthinking and this worry is really being productive and planning for the future. And they will often tell me, like, I'm being a responsible adult. I'm being logical. Can you talk a little bit more about that relationship with anxiety and high performers and how we kind of fall in this trap, believing that, the anxiety and the alarm is actually helping us?
Yeah. I mean, intellect and anxiety go together. Like it really does. Like the smarter you are, the more likely you are to be anxious.
Oh
And
man.
also, if you were born sensitive, which just about everybody, and I think most entrepreneurs are born sensitive as well.
I'm
And
sensitive.
what I notice about entrepreneurs is they're often very good in a group. They're good speakers, but one-on-one, they really struggle with that kind of, that connection, because I believe, that connection to themselves really isn't there. And the reason why they strive as an entrepreneur is to try and make themselves into not the person they were when they were a child. Like, I'm not going to be poor again. I'm not going to be bullied again. I'm not going to be this. So it's coming from this sort of position of negativity. And what I see with that is, even if those people do become successful, they really don't enjoy their success because it's not coming from this kind of authentic, holistic place. So I see a lot of people who are smart, who know that they can get somewhere by being smart, but it doesn't come from this sort of authentic place. And they believe that their anxiety is actually helping them when it's not. I mean, I think there is some evidence to suggest that, people who are anxious are overthinkers. And when you think a lot, you just become better at thinking, which in a way builds your intellect in a way.
Mm.
But also, we also have these imaginations that we can imagine these worst case scenarios as well. So the intellect is a bit of a double-edged sword as far as that goes. And it's a real marker for anxiety. Like I don't see a lot of people with anxiety who aren't quite intelligent. So it's a real marker there. So it's finding, what's authentic to me? Like, what's real to me? Why am I doing this? Like, truly, why am I doing this? And then when you can find your root cause as to why you're doing it and connect with that, your success is going to feel a lot more authentic and a lot more sustainable. Whereas if you're doing it for a reason that comes from lack, you're always going to be chasing that.
Yes, absolutely. I love this. You've given me so much to think about as I, again, have already read your book and follow you on social media. Just how complex, but yet simple anxiety is, right? Like the thoughts, the worrying, the overthinking. But
Yeah.
sometimes I feel that I'm like, as I've grown to understand this concept, can't fully understand this concept. And I'll tell you what I mean. You mentioned in your book sort of this idea between the feeling thought cycle and right how you can be trapped in this feedback loop of the worrying and the alarm, and it just goes on and on and on.
Yep.
Happens to
Yep.
people who often have to snap out of it. So as someone who has grown up with a lot of chaos or trauma, how can you really discern when your level of worrying is accurate, so to speak, or when it's not, or when you're, again, just truly overthinking versus you are being, there's I guess, a healthy level of worry or thinking of the future. Is that ever the case?
Well, I think it's an awareness. I think you develop what you're like people with health anxiety. I tell them, when you start worrying that you're going to die, you've got this horrible illness or whatever, that's your tell. I don't know if you've ever played poker, Candace, but it's like if somebody has a certain mannerism when they have a good hand or whatever, it's called a tell.
Right.
So you can have these tells that, I worry about my kids. I worry about, going into social situations. I worry about my health. Like when you have these kind of what I call frequent flyer worries, like train yourself to be very aware of that. And then once you find that you've been sucked into your mind, go back into your body. It really is about finding that place in your body and creating that sense of safety in your body.
Yeah.
Because I think we worship the mind in this society and we believe that we can use cognitive therapy to fix a feeling problem. And because these feeling problems are often in our unconscious mind, we're not really cognitively aware of them. We have to use almost a feeling/unconscious process to access these old programs. If we don't actually access them, get in the same room with these programs, in a way, we don't change them. So you can tell yourself, I'm not anxious, I feel calm, I feel peaceful. But if you don't feel it in your body, it's not going to make any long-lasting change. So it's really about understanding what do you worry about and what are the frequent flyers, and realize that when you're in those sort of frequent flyer worries, can you move out of your head and can you find this safe place in your body? Now, some people find yoga, some people find qigong, some people find painting, play, whatever. It's just finding something in your body, because your body is what's going to help you move out of that sort of overthinking hypervigilance. Developing a safe place in your body is how people heal from anxiety. So it's really about learning where these traumas trigger you in your body and then breathing into that, leaning into that. Now I'm oversimplifying this quite a bit. The book goes into it in much more detail, but it's really about creating this sense of peace and calm, finding a place in your body that's safe, creating a place in your body that's safe. Because what I believe happens is that we get these worries in our mind, and that triggers the alarm that's in our body, this old store alarm. Because I believe that we store alarm in our system, almost like a battery stores energy electrochemically. I believe that we store these old traumas in our body electrochemically, and that is read by the mind. There's this process called interoception, where the mind reads the body. It reads the internal environment and the external environment all the time. So if there is this alarm, this old trauma that's stuck in your body, your mind will read that. And that's why people tell me, it's like, well, I'm driving along and it's a beautiful day and I feel really good. And then I'm just soaked with worry. I just can't escape this worry. It's like, well, you have this alarm in your system. That's how it's acting up. And when the alarm acts up, it triggers the thoughts of the mind. And then the thoughts of the mind trigger the alarm. So you get caught in what I call the alarm anxiety cycle. And the only way to break that cycle is to break apart the thinking from the feeling. So you allow yourself to feel the pain. You put your hand over the pain. You breathe into it. You center yourself in that pain. You embrace the uncertainty of that pain. And as you neutralize the pain, the impetus for the thoughts is dissipated.
Yeah.
So if you treat the alarm the anxious, and I know this for myself because it's exactly how I healed from chronic anxiety. Once I started healing the alarm that's sitting, for me, it's in my solar plexus. Once I started healing the alarm, the thoughts just faded away because there was nothing there to feed them. And the alarm was the original root cause of my anxiety in the first place. So once I was able to sort of heal my alarm, then I was able to, create my own business and helping other people do exactly the same thing.
Yes, that's so amazing. Obviously you've been doing this work for years, but how long would you say that it took you to be able to do this successfully, consistently throughout your life, throughout your day, create a practice, ground yourself? Because a lot of my clients, we love to know, how long does something like this take
Yeah.
to be a master of your own body, mind connection?
Well, it's practice, like how long does it take to get good at guitar? It depends on how often you practice it. And if I said, hey, Candace, you know what? August the 1st, I'm going to give you 10 10 free throws on a basketball court. And if you make 3 of them, I'm going to give you $1 million. Would you start practicing the day before? No, you'd start practicing now.
Right.
So there's certain things that you can start to practice right away. Learning how to breathe better, learning the physiological sigh, which is basically 2 quick breaths in through your nose and 1 slow breath out through your mouth. So
Nice.
It's something we automatically do during sleep. It's something we automatically do during when we cry, when we release energy that way.
That's right.
It's learning different techniques that actually calm the body so that we start feeling that we have some agency in this thing we call anxiety. Because the worst thing about anxiety for me was never knowing when it was going to end.
Right.
And eventually, my brain and body would run out of epinephrine and cortisol, and it would kind of give me a little bit of a break. And then I would kind of wake up the next day and I would just start right back into that, anxiety alarm cycle again. Yeah. So I think it depends on how much you practice. I think it depends on if you're doing the right techniques. If you're actually doing some somatic therapy as well as the cognitive therapy. Like I said, I'm not against cognitive therapy or CBT or ACT or any of those things, but they're not going to heal your anxiety. They're going to make you feel better in the short term, but they're not going to heal your anxiety because they're not actually dealing with the root cause. The root cause is typically old trauma that's stored in your body like a battery. Yeah. That if you don't bring up to the surface and start metabolizing and start processing and start allowing to release, you're always going to be a victim of anxiety.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I absolutely love your work. It's been life-changing. I think it's helped me, especially as an entrepreneur, feel like it's okay that I go through these things. It's so funny. Yeah. Before starting a business, I felt like a quote unquote normal person, right? Like, oh yeah, I have anxiety, work is hard, life is hard. But then I get online and, we are putting ourselves out there and we kind of start to worry a little bit about our perception. And I felt bad for having anxiety and having an anxious, overthinking brain. And again, coming across your work reminded me of how normal and prevalent it is and really gives us the steps and the tools to manage it and handle it. And so again, I just thank you so much for your work, Dr. Kennedy.
Oh, you're welcome, Candace. Yeah, it's amazing what we restrict from our own younger self. If you were in a supermarket and a child was crying because they'd lost their parents and they had their hand up to be picked up, of course you'd pick them up. Yeah. But unfortunately, we don't do that for ourselves. We don't do that for the child in us. We often isolate and sequester that wounded child and judge, bend, and blame and shame that child. Yeah. So when you do that, you separate from yourself because all anxiety is separation anxiety. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. Ooh. All anxiety is separation anxiety, and it's separation mostly from yourself. So if you can learn to be connected to yourself, that's how you heal anxiety.
That is amazing. I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Kennedy, for being on the episode today. You are fantastic. Something exciting that I'm going to be doing for the listeners, the first 5 people who tag us both in this episode and don't have a copy of your book, I will be sending them a copy to them. So I'm super excited. Yay! Well, thank you
Thanks,
so
Candace.
much for being on this episode. And of course, I will tag all of your amazing work in the links below. Would you like to tell my audience what you have for, I know you're doing some coaching, right? You have like a program. Would you like to share that with my audience?
Yeah, I have a program that I'm in right now that I've started. It's a 12-week program to take people from the ground up as far as anxiety goes. So I'm into that now. I'll probably do another iteration of it in the fall. Every Sunday on Clubhouse at noon, I have a room on anxiety where I take questions from people. And we didn't touch on it today, but I do a lot of my work somatically, like intuitively. So I can see into people, I can see where their traumas are, and I can see how to bring them up to the surface. So I do that on Clubhouse. So it's every noon Pacific time, every Sunday. And then there's my Instagram. Like all my stuff, if you want to track me down, is The Anxiety MD. Not The Anxiety Doctor, The Anxiety MD. And Instagram, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. That's the best way to find me. But I just, this is my life's work. And, I don't want people to have to suffer with anxiety the way I did. I tried every type of medication, meditation, ACT, CBT, LMNOP, like all these, whatever, I did it all.
Right.
And nothing really helped until I actually did LSD and ayahuasca, which I don't recommend. Like it's not a panacea,
Right.
But it is something that showed me that my anxiety was actually in my body more than it was in my mind, which is very difficult concept for me to get around, especially as a medical doctor and a neuroscientist. But really, that's how I started to heal. I started to heal when I started really looking at what the true root cause of anxiety was, which is this energy in my body. So anybody who needs to track me down, just Google The Anxiety MD. I'm all over the internet.
Yes, you are. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to tag me on social media. Everything will be in the show notes. And don't forget to leave a review. And when you're ready, go ahead and visit me at www.candicechapman.com/workwithme to learn more about my private one-on-one mentorship, where I teach coaches how to make selling more effective, efficient, and fun.